Today, in Stupid Economics, we're gonna cook pasta hardcore style and we will talk about its impact on the environment. But for starters, we will need some pasta, some water, some coal, and because this is kind of some risky experiment, we will need a big pair, but a big pair of gloves. Pow! But first, let's agree on something. Climate change is a reality. It might be hard to hear, I know. So if you're not convinced, I advise you to check one of those links. And now that we all agree, let's move on.
What the hell did you say?
Well, okay, not everybody. But when you consider the number of countries that came in France for the COP21, it proves that this is indeed an important thing. To put that many people around the same table, you have to have something quite interesting to talk about. So science people did their job, and now is the time of economists to try to find a solution. From their point of view, the problem is as simple as it is complex. On one hand, we just have to use less of some resources. That's the easy part. But on the other hand, that means changing the behaviors of 7 billion people. As you can guess, that is the hard part. I promised some cooking, so let's start. Of course, you don't see any little warning that tells you that you can't do this at home. It's because you can. You can't cook pasta at home. However, you might not want to do it as I do in your neighbor's field. Actually, on a second thought, if you're living in the US, don't even try to do this. Don't go to your neighbor's field and start cooking pasta, or this will happen to you. That's my field you're cooking pasta on, boy. You ain't gonna come back now! You could think that I'm only cooking here, but what I'm really doing is an economic activity that turns coal into heat, ashes and smoke, water into hot water and steam, and raw pasta into cooked pasta. Usually we care about the pasta bit, but not today. Let's focus on the smoke because it has the tendency to flee with a load of CO2 in it. And you know the deal with CO2, it's a gas that contributes to global warming and therefore rising of ocean levels, desertifications of entire regions, loss of biodiversity and many not so cool things that impact us, all of us, in a way or another. What I just described is what an economist would call an externality. It happens when an economic activity has an impact on third parties which are not taken into account in the cost or gain of this activity. So externalities are in the sense a failure in the markets, something that should have a price tag but for some reason doesn't. For instance, if Hipsterify Inc. is producing a new kind of organic smoothie and decides to turn this field into an orchard, then the neighbor, who is a beekeeper, will benefit from it. His bees will find flowers more easily and should produce more honey and of better quality. That means more money for the beekeeper without paying anything for it. Here we have an example of a positive externality. Actually, that case is a bit special, because Hipsterify also benefits from the beekeeper's activity. The bees help pollinating the orchard. So in this situation, both benefit from each other. That is called a double positive externality. However, if now in the process of making those smoothies, Hipsterify starts to dump all its trashes into the nearby river, then the people living around it will suffer from this pollution without receiving any compensation from Hipsterify. In that case, it is a negative externality. We could imagine now that Hipsterify wish to compensate or is forced to compensate those people. By doing so, their activity might not be so profitable anymore. So they might want to take care of their waste in a different way, rather than to simply pay the people directly. But those additional costs can be too much for Hipsterify. In that case, its activity would simply stop to exist as it is not profitable anymore. So we could wonder if making everyone pay for the externalities they generate would simply eradicate pollutions. But of course, it is not that simple, because that river goes to the sea at one point. So is it really only the people nearby the river that should be compensated? The fishermen living in the other side of the world could also be impacted, as well as its clients, and as well as some other people. This is one of the main difficulties when talking about externalities. Where exactly do they start? What is quite clear though is that our system does not take into account enough of those externalities, especially when considering our barbecue case. When I barbecue stuff, I produce CO2 that contributes to global warming, which will rise the ocean level until this tiny island I don't even know the name of will be underwater with its houses, fields, and economy. Of course, I contribute very little to that, something like 0.0001%, but the guys living on this island don't participate at all in my activity. Therefore, it is an externality. Burning coal actually impacts people that are not even born yet. When I use coal today, it won't be available tomorrow. So what I'm actually doing is increasing the cost of coal for future generations. So if all that seemed confusing, give it just one more try. Rewind a bit and listen to that last sentence while imagining a world with no barbecues at all. Terrible. Terrible. In the case of CO2, the impacts are almost invisible because they're tiny and far away in time and space. It's kind of hard to commit to eat uncooked pasta because you don't want to contribute to 0.001% of something that impacts a dude that you don't even know, that lives on an island that you don't know of, and that might not even be born yet. But the thing is that if it was only barbecues causing this problem, it would be rather okay. But the problem is that most of the world electricity is produced by giant barbecues. So what I'm doing here is not too different from what I'm doing here. Now, the issue is that you don't find a single trace of externalities in here. When I buy coal, I pay for its extraction, its way to the store, but not for what it will cause, not for its externalities. So the question is, am I paying the right price? Or is that some kind of weird incentive to ignore the impact of my activity on people that I don't have the pleasure to know yet? This is rather important because it can make the difference between the use of coal, gas, nuclear or renewable energies. The idea is that producing electricity with coal might be interesting only if you forget about most of its externalities. To balance that, we could artificially increase the cost of barbecuing things and of burning coal. There are different ways to do so. One is to simply forbid it, to limit its use with quotas, or to tax it. I might miss some solutions, but that last one has a lot of support and starts to appear in many countries. By the way, now that I'm on the subject, the concept of externalities does not apply only in environmental issues. The overconsumption of antibiotics and its consequences can be better understood thanks to this concept. I will kind of oversimplify it a bit, but you can check the descriptions for more details. Each time someone takes an antibiotic, bacteria have a probability to evolve and resist this antibiotic. So each time those bacteria evolve, a new medicine is needed to take care of that evolution. Which means that the more we use antibiotics, the less efficient they become and the faster a new one is necessary. You probably already heard that medical research is something that is quite complex, very costly, and on top of that, there is always the risk of not really finding what we're looking for, which means in that case a new medicine. And that means that the future user of antibiotics is basically paying for the overconsumption of the present user.
That's my field you cooking pasta on, boy!
You ain't gonna come back now.